Well, hello, I'm Ed Parcaut, the host of Helping the Brave, and let's bring in our guest today. He is Dave Wolcott. Dave, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Ed, really grateful to be here to connect with you and the audience.
I see we have like mics.
For sure.
Well, you got to have good mics these days. That's one of the things people don't understand. When you get on podcasts, you really need to have the equipment because it's a better experience for everybody when you have good equipment. Some people try to do it with their ear pods or whatever you want to call them. It's like doesn't work as well. You need the quality so people, and it makes it easier on the editors. So just so people know.
Yeah.
All right. So we were talking before we went live, and you were in the United States Marine Corps. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure, Ed. So, I
First
was
question is,
raised
why did you choose the Marine Corps? If you
the
could add
Marines.
that in,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think I can provide some context. Yeah, originally, and I was raised in a middle class family in Connecticut, and I was told that the recipe for success was go to school, get good grades. You're going to get a good job, and then life would just kind of work out, right? So I kind of followed down that path. And somewhere along the way in high school, I had this inkling to become a Marine Corps officer. I thought there would be, nothing bigger and more challenging that I could do for myself personally. And I really wanted to serve my country as an opportunity to really give back to people. And at the same time, really challenge myself. So I did that, did the ROTC program, went to George Washington University in DC, and then shortly thereafter got into the Marines. Had a phenomenal experience. I was in from 92 to 96 were the years, so right at the tail end of the first Gulf. We were actually in when just after Black Hawk Down happened, and we were on the Marine Expeditionary Unit that went into Somalia on our deployment. So that was a great experience. Was combat tested and worked with just some amazing people. And I think, things that us military veterans, they just don't teach you anywhere else in the world. Things such as leadership, teamwork, and integrity that are so important. And then after the Marine Corps, I transitioned into corporate America, got into the tech industry, and was really trying to figure it out. And I quickly got really dismayed, Ed. I was really frustrated that I lost that sense of purpose, that sense of mission that drove me, every day in my waking hour. And then at the same time, my wife and I started to build a family. And October 24th, 2000, we literally had triplets and quadrupled the size of our family because we had another one at home. And the first thing I did, right, was a father was just try to talk to my financial advisor and figure out how am I going to do this, right? It's $1 million to raise a kid. I now have four of them. I want to retire someday, and I want to live a big life, right? And he told me the same advice that every other one said, which is just, put your money in, 401k, max that out. They've got 529 plans for your kids. You can do things like that. And it was kind of right then that I realized that, building wealth as a retail investor was just, that was just average. I was not going to outperform that way. So it really set me
Dave,
on this.
I know you got a lot. So I do radio, and we learned to do 1 to 3 minute answers. And please don't take this wrong, but I want to have a conversation. But one of the things that what you're talking about is for most people it works, but not for everybody. That's a vanilla answer to just do these certain things. If you've ever listened to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or read his books, he talks about that in there, and a bunch of other people talk about it also. So you are correct. So, and I just want to have a conversation also. So, okay.
100%, 100%. Just trying to provide the context
I
here.
got it.
So,
I got you. I got you.
yeah, so that really, put me on this, kind of obsessive quest to kind of figure out how the top 1% were building their wealth. So I started investing in private equity, different private assets, everything from oil and gas to single family, multifamily, raw land, all kinds of different assets. And then fast forward to today, and I've distilled all of that into a book that I call the Holistic Wealth Strategy to really help other people figure out really a blueprint and a roadmap to building wealth, because it's really all about financial freedom, right, is really one thing, but once you go past that, it's all about like living the life that, we dreamed about living.
And that's kind of why I wanted you on the show, because veterans, we do really well in business. 50% of us are business owners, they said, which is 1% of the population for that. And we don't know how to invest. We don't know the financial literacy in general out of school is horrible. They don't teach any of that. So that stuff needs to be taught today. And the more people can put out books about that. And that's why I wrote my book, Financial Freedom, Building Personal Wealth Through Home Ownership. And I understand that for some people, a house is not an asset. It's a liability, but you're going to have to live somewhere. So I always tell people to buy a triplex, a fourplex with their first deal. That way they have an investment. And then down the road, they can get their house that they want.
Yeah, makes
Especially
sense.
with the VA loan, when you can buy the house with no money down.
Yeah.
So,
No, there's phenomenal opportunities there. Yeah. My daughter, who's 25, bought her first home, house hacked that, and she's 25 years old. They built up almost 150K in equity already.
yeah. And
Yeah.
what people don't understand is what people call house hacking is what we call renting rooms out back in the day, right? Is that what you're talking about? The house hacking that people talk
Yes.
about? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because most people, we never had a coined phrase for that. Most of us won't rent. But what I'm trying to explain is, if you're a veteran, you can buy a fourplex with no money down, but you have to be able to qualify for the whole payment, where you can't use the rents, where other people will buy a place and then rent out the rooms to help them, or they do other things like convert the garage in Southern California and other places into another living space to help offset the costs. I think people just do things differently than what we did when we were younger.
Sure.
Right. I mean, when you had your 3 kids, would you want to have people living in your house with you?
Absolutely not. It didn't make sense,
Right.
right?
But for some people today, it does. So, because things are so much more expensive than when we were. I mean, the cost of housing and everything has increased so greatly versus what the income is. So you need additional forms of income. You need to invest. You need to do certain things differently. And you need an advisor like yourself to help you understand that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, one of the big things that I realized, Ed, was that most people just don't take the time to, number one, create your own vision statement, because if you don't have a target, you're going to miss every time. So it all starts with getting crystal clear clarity on what your vision is, what is your outcome, where are you trying to get to, right? And then you can start to put the pieces in place from there.
So how do most people do that?
So a great way to do that is, if you have a spouse or significant other, it's really about being in a peak state. So sometimes, in whether you're on vacation, or you've just exercised, you've meditated, right? You're in a really good place mentally, and you sit down and just journal with some blank paper. What is it that's really important to you? Is it relationships? Is it health? Is it a career? And what about your career, right, are you trying to get to? And I find that most people are really looking for not only financial freedom to have money to do the things that it is that you want to do, but it's also about freedom of purpose, to wake up every day and be fascinated and motivated by the work that you're doing. It's also about having freedom of relationships, to choose who it is you want to actually spend time with and work with. It's also about freedom of time, right? And choosing the time that's really, going to make us, make a difference in our lives, right? That we can live that intentional lives. So I think when people start to kind of unpack the why around financial freedom, right, and keep asking why, you can get to these other dimensions of freedom that are really what's driving us.
And when did you figure all this out for yourself? What?
So, Ed, this has been a 20-year
Okay.
journey, right? I mean, this is not
I'm
like
trying to
yeah,
Yeah, I'm trying to explain to people, it's like building a business. People think it's
yeah.
overnight successes. It's not. It's constantly building, and yes, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn from those mistakes, but you have to do something than do nothing.
Yeah, I think it's really about focusing on the process, right? And wealth creation is a process, it's a system. And slow and steady is actually what wins the race, right? But I think a lot of us always think that, hey, we're going to go do some crypto deal and I'm going to become a millionaire overnight, right? Or whatever it might be, we want that quick fix. But when you can actually start to set systems and processes in place, you start to make progress incrementally. And then all of a sudden, you'll realize that this will start to snowball. Right. And then, one thing, you start cutting your taxes over here, you start increasing multiple streams of income over here, right? And your asset value continues to grow. And all of these things really come together.
Yeah, I don't think people understand that you're not taxed as much on passive income. You're taxed more on active income, meaning what you work for at your job is taxed greater than passive income and other income. So that's the big difference when you look at these things. And that's why a lot of people have businesses, because they're able to offset their taxes.
Yeah, and in the second phase of our holistic wealth strategy, it's all about improving your financial IQ. So getting smarter, right, about a lot of these concepts that, frankly, you just can't find anywhere except on, good podcasts like this or books and things like that. So one of the investments we actually have a deal in oil and gas, and people understand real estate, but in oil and gas, you can actually invest into a working interest in energy and get an offset of your active income on your taxes. So you can get basically a paper loss that shows up on your investment that can reduce your taxes. So there's some kind of sophisticated strategies here, and as they all kind of relate to one another, I like to call it really getting a three-dimensional return on your investments, which is we're looking for passive income, we're looking for tax efficiency, and then we're looking for some type of forced appreciation where we can grow the value inside of the asset. And if you compare that to, let's say, a traditional stock, if you have $1,000 worth of Tesla stock, the only thing you're hoping for is what? It's going to go up in value, right? But in reality, it can go sideways, it can go lower. So in this space, you can get that three-dimensional return. Real estate, for instance, is a great asset class that does that as well.
The only issue would be is if they pass this thing they've been talking about, the unrealized capital gains, if that ever got in. I know that most people have been talking about it's for people who have a lot of income. But what people understand is in what was 1913 when they did the 16th Amendment for the tax, they sold it with the Robin Hood effect, which means we're going to take from the rich and give to the poor. Don't worry, working class, you won't ever have to pay taxes. We're only going to tax the rich. And then they didn't get enough money from the rich because they learned how to offset their taxes. So now we have income tax for everybody. So any of these things could affect, and I'm just putting it out there. That's why you don't want to vote on this and pass it, and because it's we're going to go after the rich. It doesn't work that way, and just understand that you can fight the system or you can actually become wealthy.
Yeah, well, one thing that I learned, Ed, which I think is really interesting, right? So, as part of my financial IQ and increasing my education, I actually spent a lot of time learning about taxes, right? As an entrepreneur, I kept paying more and more, keep hiring more prestigious firms, and I kept paying more and more. And I was like, what is the answer, right? Until I finally came across some proactive tax planners, people that work with business owners. And the one thing that people should really understand is that you have to make the paradigm shift, which is thinking that taxes are just basically a fine or a fee that I have to pay taxes, right? Based on my income for the services that I'm getting. But in reality, the taxes are actually a series of incentives for business owners and investors. So the reason why you're getting a tax break on real estate, for instance, is you're becoming a partner with the government because we have a shortage of housing in this country. They want you to be able to create those types of opportunities. If you're a business, you're providing employment for people, right? So that's why you get business deductions. And the same thing in oil and gas, right? I mean, you're in the you were in the Navy, right? What do you think powers these ships, right? It's oil and gas, right? It supports our national defense. So we have to be able to invest it. And it's actually small time. 80% of the industry is like, small producers around this country. So we have to be able to provide incentives. And, the other thing that's interesting is regardless of, politics, both the right and the left, support a lot of these things because they're investing in these types of assets as well.
Right. I mean, the biggest difference between what you just said is the fact that one side taxes and spends, the other side borrows and spends. It still works out to being the same in the end. You just have to not worry about what's going on and just focus on building business and figure out ways around to save on taxes by you doing things like you just talked about with the oil and gas. I just heard about that the other day. I've been doing so I was the president of my Rotary for a year, got pretty heavy, 291. I'm like, okay, it's time to lose weight. So I started walking a lot more. So I walk 5 miles a day instead of running. And I have went through so many books. It's ridiculous just because I also do it on a fast speed, right? 1.8, because a lot of people talk slow when they do their book. So if you speed it up, you can still understand everything they're saying. So,
yeah.
What I'm getting at is invest in yourself and listen to things or read books or do things to help you get better at understanding things. I know so much more in the last month than I did it a month ago because of all the books I've listened to and read.
Yeah. A great way to think of it, it's like an update on your software. Every time you do an update, right, you're faster and better. And I think, that's a really important takeaway for people out there. And again, I don't think we learned this anywhere. No one really taught us this, but it's this concept that you are your greatest asset, bar none. So whatever you can do to increase your own education, your health, your relationships. I mean, I've always gotten a 10x or 100x return on those types of investments. That's going to take you further. So if you don't have the financial capital to invest right now, then invest in yourself, right? Like as Ed is saying, get smarter, read books, listen to podcasts, try to find all this information that's going to move you closer to your goals.
Yeah, because your greatest asset is your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, just
It's the real estate between your ears.
and there's so much you can do. I mean, people are looking at what they can't do. Stop focusing on what you can't do. Figure a way how you can do it. So don't look at the negative, look at the positive. And a lot of people don't. And that's that's what you need to work on. And a lot of people, I mean, need this help. And the financial literacy is huge. And like I said, you wrote a book. I wrote a book. I think there needs to be more of it. There needs to be more in school taught. They don't even teach anything about a checkbook. Not that people use checkbooks these days, but any of that thing, when they use any money out of their account, how do they know they really have that money? We help our kids with credit. And my son, when he joined he's in the Army, when he got up to his first duty station and buy his car, his sergeant's like, oh, is your parents helping you? She goes, no, I have a 750 FICO score. They helped me work on that. I understand what I need to do. And so he bought his first car, which is unusual for a service member when they first get enlisted to not, have that type of thing working on. And he bought his first house at 21 when he transferred down from Alaska to Washington State, which is big. Because you got to start investing at one point.
Yeah, I mean, there's some amazing people out there, like the Active Duty Passive Income podcast. There's Hutch, the Marine investor, right? These guys are doing investments in real estate, leveraging the VA loan, like you talked about, all even while in active duty, or investing in their education. So they're really getting positioned well to make that transition. And I never had that. I just transitioned, and it was kind of like, well, what's next, right? We're going to have to kind of reinvent ourselves. But yeah, if you're deployed, like you said, I mean, I spent so much time, right, being deployed, or you're traveling, and nowadays you can listen to books on Audible, listen to podcasts. There's so much that you can actually do, and really take charge of your own financial future, because otherwise you can either let life happen to you, or you can let life happen for you.
Yeah, when we were because I was in the same period of time in the early 90s, got out, there was none of this. The VA loan back then was horrible. It was the worst loan out there. There wasn't enough to buy it pretty much anywhere in California, all the way up through the 2000s. And then the most recent change that happened, the Blue Water Act, that one puts it up to 2.5 million with no money down, and it's the best loan out there. And so things have changed now that we didn't have, to make it easier to do what these people are doing. Plus, like you just said, listening to podcasts, YouTube channel, everything that's out there, so much information out there to get what you need that we didn't have access to. We only had books or cassettes or CDs, or, it wasn't the same, which is, but you also have to be okay with just learn it and then go do it. Don't
Right.
wait.
That's a great point too, right? Because it's not that knowledge is power, it's knowledge plus execution is power. So you have to start, getting into the game. And as I mentioned in my story, in 2000, right? I can remember, I mean, literally to this day, I mean, my wife and I had a toddler, an 18-month-old toddler. We had triplets, and we're driving around looking at single family properties at night, after work, trying to, look and see if they were good investments, then penciling out the numbers, in the wee hours, trying to see if it was good or not, right? But we had to take action. We took action, and not every investment does work out, but the learning experience is just so powerful, right? Where you can kind of take that from.
What do you want people to get out of your book?
The biggest thing I think, Ed, is really that, right? Understanding that you are your greatest asset, right? And also thinking about wealth in a different way. It's like, when do we really stop and say, what does that really mean? Like, we talk about creating passive income, or we talk about things like having financial freedom, and they show the picture of the couple going off into the sunset. But I don't know about you, but if I love what I'm doing, I have so much purpose, why would I ever stop doing it? Right? You retire from things you don't want to do. Right? So I think helping people change the way they think about wealth and really getting clear on what's really important to them. And then you set goals to try to achieve that.
All right. And then in your book, what would you say the most important chapter is?
Probably the first one, where I kind of talk about my journey, and really it all starts with mindset, Ed, because if you don't have a growth mindset where you're open to new ideas, you're understanding yourself, and you're forgetting about things like limiting beliefs, like where you were born. Look at a guy like Elon Musk right now, right? He was born in South Africa, didn't have anything. His book is phenomenal, by the way. What he grew up with, his parents, and look at what he's been able to achieve right now. That's all mindset, and then compare that to someone like you went to high school with, who's still in the same town with the same set of friends and maybe even the same job, right? It's how you think about things. So we want to have a growth mindset, and we want to, we're born with this, this lizard brain, right? That thinks in scarcity, right? That's what the human species is meant to instinctually kind of, look for fear, right? And protect ourselves at all costs. But you have to access the other side of your brain, which is very aspirational, right? And it wants to do different things, right? So when you can kind of harness the power of having an abundance mindset, a growth mindset, you can really become unstoppable.
All right. So when we write books, people don't understand the process. You get it done. Is there anything that you wish you would have put in there that you didn't put in there? You know what I mean? That, like, sometimes there's things that change. Like when my book came out, I had said, luckily we haven't hit 7 or 8% interest rates at this point when I wrote it, because I was writing it in 21. And then as it came out, guess what? We hit 7% interest rates. So
Yeah, I mean, mine is really a timeless framework. So, regardless of market cycles, I think this framework really applies in all of them. There's probably one other concept that I would go into in more detail. And so, I actually spent a lot of time with centimillionaires, and centimillionaire communities. And there's a really, important concept again about people to think about wealth, right? We think about this financial capital dimension, right? But there's these other dimensions, things like your intellectual capital, your physical capital, your spiritual capital, your emotional capital, right? So really trying to understand, all these other dimensions of capital and saying, how can I, invest, right? How can I invest in myself and grow these other things? And these are really important, right? So think about it. The people who win the lottery, for instance, right? They actually don't have the intellectual capital to keep the money that they just won. So then they lose. The statistics are they lose all. Same with all of our sports heroes out there, right? They make these crazy contracts and they're usually broke within 5 years after, because they don't have that intellectual capital to understand how, finances actually work, or they might not have the emotional capital to really manage their emotions and move forward. So, I think that would be the other thing that I would probably add.
Yeah, because I don't think you added also people who win the lottery, 80% of them go bankrupt afterwards because
Yeah.
the same thing. People, people who, they said if you gave all the money to everybody in the United States, the same people would end up with the money at the end.
Right. And another interesting statistic as well is that, by generation 2 of, wealth builders, right? It's up to almost 80%, right, of that wealth is actually lost, right, in the second generation. And then by the third generation, it's up to 90%, which is lost, right? So people have not been able to pass down, they pass down money, but they haven't passed down values or the intellectual smarts, the intellectual capital to really understand how to manage it the right way.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to understand, because I see it here with first generation, second generation, and third generational wealth. The that way you just talked about, by the third generation, it's usually already gone, depending on the companies, unless they have passed down education along with it. What they need to do, they need to go make their own stuff before they can get any of the money of the family.
Yeah.
Which is hard because the worst thing you can do is give your kids a ton of money.
It's the worst thing you could do.
People
Absolutely.
go,
Yeah.
no, that'd be right. No, because they have no incentive to do anything.
Right.
And that's who gets, you see it. And I'm not knocking Biden, but like his son with the problem with drugs, you have these people who they have nothing to do, no purpose in life. It's the same thing with us veterans. That's why we have PTSD issues and we have people on drugs. We lose our purpose. And we have these issues that we need to deal with. From doing my show, Helping the Brave, this is my take on it. Most people have PTSD. Is 80% of them is something from their childhood. What we saw in the military just exacerbated it. So until you take care of that issue and deal with that issue, you're going to have these issues, and that's what I've just found. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, and one of the interviews with the guy who's the founder of that Centimillionaire community, right? They've got over 150 members. Average net worth is 400 million. And you know what he told me was the most important characteristic that people have? It's actually self-awareness, right? So really understanding yourself, right, is just super important.
and a lot of us don't even spend any time on us.
No. No, it's not taught anywhere, right? It's all of this self-development. But look, if you're here today and you're listening to this podcast, then, kudos to you, right? Because you're trying to get smarter. You are investing in yourself. But this is a journey, right? It doesn't end here. It's a continual growth of progress. And look at even top performers in any, sports arena, anywhere, even military performers, right? You're only trying to get better at your craft, but you have to constantly, invest in it.
Right. Dave, how do people find you? And where's your book?
Yeah, look, we've got a free copy. I wanted to give out a free copy of the book to your listeners, Ed. So you could just go to holisticwealthstrategy.com and get a free copy. If you do go on Amazon, by the way, we're actually donating 100% of our proceeds all to thefund.org, which helps military veterans in need who've been disabled. So appreciate the support there. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what you're doing May 3rd, 2025, but I put on a fire walk for veterans last year here in Modesto, California. It was a 2-day event. Each day was a separate day. This year we're just doing a 1-day event. We're going to have 4 different speakers, amazing keynote speaker, and then at the end of the night we walk across coals, and it's the guy that's doing is David Alvin. Have had him here last year, but he worked for Tony Robbins for 22 years, so it's all
Wow.
amazing. And my goal was just to help one veteran, and we helped a lot of veterans those 2 days.
Awesome, man. That's excellent, Ed. Yeah.
All right, Dave, thanks so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge with everybody. And please reach out, go get your free copy of his book. And if you definitely go to on Amazon and leave a review. I know it's not a verified purchase review, but at least it's a review.
Appreciate that. Thanks so much, Ed.
All right, thank you. Make it a great day, everybody.